This video is for entertainment purposes only. None of the information you're about to hear should be considered medical advice, and you should always consult a licensed medical practitioner before embarking on a health or lifestyle change. Okay, so we've got Daniel and Janet from Two Doctors Homestead. That's your YouTube channel name.
Yes, sir. Yes, it is. Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. I guess I had first come across your channel, I think probably at Tom Garvey's live stream. I think I'd seen you in there a few times, and then you did a live stream with Tom and Mike, I think you did one time.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, sir.
So I had heard sort of about your channel and, you know, some of the things you've gone through as far as health journeys and all that. So I wanted to get you here to hear your story and bring it to my viewers and, you know, bring it to your viewers. We can, you know, send it out to anybody that hopefully we can help with these different stories. So why don't we just start with sort of some background as, you know, on your end as far as, you know, what led to the health journeys you're on and, you know, how things are going.
Absolutely. Do you want to jump in on why keto?
Why keto?
Why
Yeah.
keto?
Well, I had a heart attack a couple years ago, and I've been watching my blood sugar since the heart attack because I'm on 18 medications for my heart because I have heart failure, and inevitably a couple of those medications do increase my blood glucose level. They just naturally do it. Diuretics do it, but if I didn't take my diuretics, I wouldn't be able to breathe. So you kind of have to, the benefit has to outweigh the risk of the side effects. So it's been about 2.5 years now, and I've just been monitoring my blood sugar. And what I noticed is it was slowly just going up and up and up. And it got close to the 180s, and that's at a fasting. And that really scared me because both of my parents were diabetic. So I'd seen my doctor probably 7 months before for a physical, and he said, why don't you try keto?
All right.
Yeah, which, you know, they'd already had me on a low sodium, low fats, low cholesterol diet since the heart attack. But I thought, wow, keto, like you guys are going the opposite of what you just put me on before. Yeah. And I held off on it because, you know, it took a lot to go low sodium, low fat. So, you know, I thought, wow, you know, like I kind of just got the groove of this low sodium thing, but I had to have just a routine test. And I noticed I started checking my blood sugar again, and it was just getting too high. So I'm like, you know what, let's try the keto. And honestly, I thought it was just bacon and eggs for breakfast type of stuff. I mean, it kind of reminded me of what Atkins was back in the day with the fat and everything. And a lot of times all you hear through media and stuff is just the fat stuff. So I actually looked at YouTube for it, and I probably spent a week on different YouTube channels looking at stuff. That's how I found Tom. That's how I found you. And I'd seen a couple of the doctors that, you know, have YouTube sites, and I felt like after about a week, I kind of maybe had a handle to be able to start it, because I mean, it's difficult. And I started with downloading a thing to count my macros and everything. And I was like, shoot, this is hard. Like, I didn't realize that there was carbs and all this stuff, but it's been 3 months, and honestly, it gets easier. I mean, as you learn, I'm amazed at how much you can retain. You know, I'm like, oh my, you know, I know how many carbs are in that already. I'm not going to eat it. Mm-hmm. So it's been, I think within the first month, I went from a fasting blood sugar of around 180s down to the 120s. And that was doing what I thought was keto, which I was still buying like the keto breads, you know, stuff like that. I mean, it definitely wasn't what I now think people call clean keto. You know, I didn't realize how many carbs were like in squash and eggplant and stuff. So I think as I got further and further on in the 3 months, I realized that I was probably eating way more carbs than the 20 net carbs a day. But I'm 3 months in now, and I had some blood tests done, found out that I was allergic to wheat and wheat gluten.
Yeah.
which really helped with cutting the carbs because then I stopped buying the keto breads and stuff like that.
Right.
And that's really when I started to see a difference because then my blood sugar started dropping into like the 110s fasting. But for the past month now, I guess you'd call it ketovore. I mean, I try to be carnivore as much as I possibly can because when you cut the bread, you know, there's really not a lot left to what you were used to eating before because I didn't realize it, but I was eating heavy carbs, you know. So now I try to just focus on the protein. If I want a veggie, I'll give myself a veggie because I feel like your body knows what you need. So if I really am looking at that broccoli and going, wow, that would be great now, I feel like that's my body telling me, go get some broccoli. You know, I still go heavy, you know, on the protein part of it though. So, I mean, I actually enjoy carnivore more than I enjoy keto.
Yeah.
But I think it's still ketovore because I do like to put spice on my food. You know, I like to put a little garlic powder and stuff like that. And that's not true. That's not true carnivore. You know, it's just salt, you know,
Yeah.
but you got to live. That's the one thing I learned after my heart attack. You got to live, you know, within your means, you got to enjoy life. So
Right.
I feel better now than I did before.
Yeah.
You know, my blood sugar has dropped. I went to the doctor and I had my blood test done for the year. And since I had my heart attack, I had stage 3B kidney disease. So my EGFR was in the 40s, sometimes in the high 30s, which is bad because 60 or above is normal. And for 2.5 years, I was always running it in the 30s and 40s. And my recent blood draw for the first time since my heart attack was in the 60s. I mean, I got kidney function back, and that was from just bringing my blood sugar down. So that to me is probably the best thing that I've gotten out of it. The decrease in blood sugar has given me some kidney function back.
Right.
You know, because you always worry about your kidneys. You know, so I mean, it's helped me.
Yeah, and that's one of the common things you hear against keto. I think as a diet is everyone's like, oh, well, you're gonna hurt your kidneys and
right,
bad for your kidneys and all that. But you know, this just shows that it's not the meat that we're eating that's damaging your kidneys. It's the sugar.
It's the sugar, right?
Yeah, it's the sugar. It's the sugar that's taking you out because for 2.5 years, I mean, I thought, man, I have to stay in the 30s because if I dip down to stage 4, that's right before dialysis.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, my dad went through dialysis for 5 years before he passed, and that is not fun at all. So that was something, I think, more than worrying about my heart failure, I was worried about the kidneys. So, and I've done so much research on kidneys. They say go low protein because the low protein is better for your kidneys. And, you know, I just put it out there as the faith of let's try keto, let's cut the sugar. And it was amazing that I got that much kidney function back.
Right.
Yeah.
And the whole, what I like to tell people too is that, you know, it doesn't take forever to happen either. You're only 3 months in and already you're seeing, you know, major improvements and things like that. And I've heard it over and over again, like people's fasting blood sugar will go down, they're fasting insulin. You know, a lot of people get their A1C checked regularly and they see it decline pretty quickly. So, you know, the outer sort of results of keto with weight loss and all that can take time, but it's the healing that I find, you know, really impressive with the change in diet, how quickly it can take hold.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't do it for weight loss though. You know, I'm 50 pounds heavier than I was pre-heart attack. I was always just pretty thin. You know, I worked out a lot. I was thin. So, but I know that with the severity of my heart failure, you know, I'm not going to be, you know, 125 pounds again. And I'm okay knowing that. I just wanted to get all this health stuff under control. On a side, I did lose 10 pounds in 3 months, which is nice. I'm not really doing it for weight loss because, you know, I mean, for me, I'm like, I was thin my whole life. Just let me be fat now. Give me my chance to be fat.
Right.
Sure. And and that's the best way to look at it too, because if you're just focused on weight, then that just drives you nuts trying to
Mhm.
trying to look at that all the time. Like I know a lot of people see the success stories, but I again, another thing I try and emphasize is that forget about the weight, just focus on how you feel. Are you
Yeah.
feeling better? You have more energy, you're I found a lot of nagging sort of pain I had went away pretty quickly as well. So, yeah, I lost a lot of weight when I first started, but it quickly turned from weight loss to overall health pretty quickly.
Yeah, I noticed when I cut the wheat, because I used to have a really bad shortness of breath. When I cut the wheat, I was able to breathe again,
Hmm.
which it's so nice to be able to feel like you can breathe. And more speaking onto that, you can be thin your whole life and not be healthy, because I was thin and I worked out and I could do stuff and I still had a massive heart attack at 47 that killed the whole tip of my heart. So it's not, health is not related to what size you fit into. And I think as a society, we look at that and we say, oh, look at that person. They're considered obese. Of course, they're going to have a heart attack. Of course, they're going to be diabetic and whatnot. But I mean, I had high cholesterol for 5 years before my heart attack. It was only 230. I've known people in the 300s, but 230 is still too high for a cholesterol. But the doctors weren't that concerned about it because they looked at me and they're like, oh, you look healthy, So it's not about the scale. It's about, like you said, how do you feel? You could be 20 pounds over what your ideal BMI is, but if you see the results of keto, you have good kidney function, you have more energy, you have less joint pain because my joint pain has gone away. That's really what matters. Your health is what matters, not, how you look and how much weight you're carrying. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And I just sit here thinking about, because it can go the other way too. Like when I first started, within the first year, when I was still weighing using a scale, the last number I saw was just under 200 pounds, which I was like, okay, well, this is great. But at that moment, I was like, well, yeah, but I don't really feel great.
Right.
Like I don't.
Right.
It sort of suddenly dawned on me that, okay, well, this is great. I haven't been under 200 pounds since I was 18,
Mhm.
but is this really what I'm supposed to be? How I'm supposed to be? And it turned out I wasn't. Typically I'm probably between 210, 220. Normally, just living the way I do now, and that's ultimately your body's going to dictate where you feel best, I think, as long as you're putting the right fuel in.
Right.
So
Yeah. You got a little keto.
Yeah, the keto's been good for me too.
I came along the journey.
I came along the journey. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it together. But a couple years ago, my cousin passed of liver failure, more alcohol induced than anything. But he was a couple years older. It was a couple years ago. So it was about my age that he passed of liver failure. And my doctor hasn't been super happy about my liver last couple years. So last time I went to the doctor, he's like, hey, keto's good. So I'm like, hey, I'm going on keto here. And I have lost some weight. So certainly that makes him happier. And it certainly doesn't hurt. One thing with the liver, losing the weight will help, right?
mm-hmm.
If you want to try to drop 10% of your body weight or something like that, just to help kind of clear things up. So I think it helps me as well. And I don't miss it so much. I've never been a big sugar person. I don't quite have the sweet tooth. So just cutting out a lot of the sugars, all the sugars and whatnot.
I had a sweet tooth.
She's the sweet tooth of the family. Hasn't really bothered me too much. Like I don't mind. This morning I made breakfast and we had chorizo that we had made from the pigs we raised ourselves. And then threw some eggs in there from our chickens and a couple other things. And that was just breakfast. And that's pretty close to keto, I think. Just basically eggs and sausage and cheese and some spices. So like to me, I could eat like that all the time. that wasn't a hard sell. Like, okay, more
Yeah.
meat and cheese and stuff like that. Great. We can do that. I mean, I like bread, you know, I don't miss the bread, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't too big of a sell to switch to keto. I said, and certainly for my own health, you know, that it doesn't hurt, drop a little bit of weight. And I have, last time I weighed in, I was at 219, and I can't remember the last time I was under 220. Like I honestly couldn't tell you, you know, was I 20 years old? I'm 45 now. I don't know. I don't know. Last time I was under 219. I don't weigh myself every day, but I know on my belt, I've gone from, there was a point where I was on the final last loop before the end, and now I'm on the last loop before I'm out of loops. So they're like, you know, my belt's telling me a story. I'm like, all right, that's pretty good.
Right.
I like the belt, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do now going forward. I'm out of loops on the inside of it instead of out of loops on the outside of it. So I mean, it's certainly in that sense, and it does. I think feel healthier. You know, sometimes I'll do a little cheat, and you can feel it. Like, yeah, that didn't make me feel good. Like I ate that, and now I don't feel good. So maybe I don't do that anymore. You know, I think you do get more in touch with your body and how the food's affecting you, especially when you don't, you know, I've always kind of made fun of people that were like, hey, I'm gluten free. It's like, you're not allergic to gluten. That was me.
I was always like, I'm dairy free, I'm gluten free.
Right.
I did every trend there was. I did it all.
I mean, celiac disease is very rare, and that's the gluten allergy. So I feel like there was a certain payback irony in that, because I was like, no, you're not allergic to gluten. Sorry. It's a lot rarer than you think.
It's more of a sensitivity.
It's a sensitivity.
Because the blood test I had showed sensitivity to gluten.
Right. Yeah, but cutting it out, I feel better. So now I'm kind of like looking back on myself, like, hey, maybe I shouldn't have made fun of people for saying they were allergic to gluten. God doesn't like ugly pig. Right, because it's like, no, actually, I do feel better, honestly. And you know, we went out. It is harder on keto to go out to eat. Like, there's some places we can go. We went out to eat last night. Place called 54th Street Grill, and you can do like a whole keto meal there. You know, it's kind of they'll do the steaks, like steak is keto. You can pick your vegetables as keto, you know, get the hot wings for the appetizer. So like you can go keto there, but there's a lot of places we can't go out to eat.
I think it's harder to go carnivore, because I've been trying to do carnivore when you go out to eat. Because a lot of people are just like, you want what?
Yeah.
Like, you know, how much meat do you possibly want?
Right.
But, I mean, I realized just from going from keto to just trying to be carnivore as much as possible, so I guess technically ketovore, like I had a really bad sweet tooth. Even on keto, I still craved at some degree sweets.
Yeah.
Not at all when I slid more towards the carnivore.
Yeah.
And I have a sweet tooth. I feel like the less carbs I consume, the less I want carbs. Right. You know, the closer I get to zero, my body, it's like it doesn't even exist anymore. Yeah.
And we raise our own animals. So if I open the window, you'd see we got a big old chicken coop back there. So we get more eggs every day than we know what to do with, honestly. We'll give them away, and we'll feed them back to the chickens and feed them to the dogs. And then we raise pigs. We don't have any pigs right now, but we're going to pick up some pigs. So we really don't have a shortage of meat. Like when you're raising your own chickens, you're raising your own pigs, eggs, pork, that stuff, it actually gets pretty cheap if you have the land and you're willing to put in the time. Like we pay about $1 a pound for pork, and that's the bacon, that's pork ribs, any of it, because we raise it ourselves, and that's certainly a lot of work, and we process the animals ourselves. Otherwise, that cost would go way up just paying to send it to the butcher. So we really don't have a shortage of meat. So it's like, okay, we'll go keto. We're just going to eat more of all that meat. Like maybe we'll get some freezer space someday if we eat enough of that meat, you know, and same thing with the eggs and even eating the chicken sometimes. So we certainly have the food available. We don't have a cow or goats where we could get our own dairy, but kind of going in that direction. It was an easy sell. Like, okay, yeah, we'll just eat more of the meat and less bread.
It's an easy sell when you start feeling better.
Yeah, and you start feeling better.
Yeah, when you realize that, you know, you really don't want that pain in your knees, and you eat something and you get that like pain in your knee that you're like, wow, you know, I'm just like, I'm not having that anymore. Like, you know, at some point you're like, is the cheat worth it? And it's not. For me, it's just not worth it, because you physically don't feel good. His friends like took us out for Korean barbecue, and I'm like, man, I don't know if that's keto. But they were on keto before, and they're like, oh no, it's great, it's keto. as the meat's on the grill, I'm like, that's like, caramelizing on the grill, like your sugar on it. It's not
it's
like
gotta
it's
be,
a
yeah.
regular barbecue.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
felt so sick the entire next day.
Yeah.
I pretty much laid in bed because
Right.
I felt horrible, and it reminded me of how I felt before I went on keto.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Not worth it.
Yeah, that's the one thing, like it's, you're already experiencing it after you've done it long enough, and you realize just how good you can feel. Eliminated that. I eliminated all gluten from my diet for 5 years before I started keto because it was really bothering me. I was never diagnosed with celiac, but I just couldn't tolerate it, so I just got rid of it. And I felt better, but I gained a lot of weight because I was
Right.
eating a lot more carbs in like potatoes and rice and everything like that. So, but what I always say is that until you make a change and you start feeling really healthy and really good, it's not until then that you realize just how bad you can feel,
Yeah.
especially when you have something that, like you say, that you think it's keto or someone says it is, and then you eat it, and then the next day you just feel like you've just been hit by a train, right? So it's
Right.
that just, you're exactly right. And that's why I try not to ever go off plan because I just know how bad I'll feel the next day.
Yeah. And I don't think you realize that until you start eliminating things from your diet. Right. And you can eliminate it, and then you go back in, you're like, whoa, I feel bad, and then you can say, okay, that was it, right? Because I eliminated it and I felt good, and then I ate it and I didn't feel good. You can actually start to understand, how those foods are impacting you.
Yeah, keto's a great elimination diet.
Right. You can actually start seeing like, yeah, no, I ate that and I felt bad, and I didn't eat it and I feel good. Like you can actually start kind of understanding your body a little bit more versus if you're just eating the same kind of stuff all the time, you don't know why you don't feel good.
Well, and that's the thing. Like if you're living on a standard American diet or, just eating like 99% of the people out there, like you say, you just don't know what feeling good really feels like. So you're exactly right. The more you can eliminate from your diet, and like, I always say there's a big spectrum of healthy eating, right? Some people can thrive on sort of lazy, dirty keto. They can have all the products, they can have everything as long as they're not eating like processed carbohydrates. But then there's some people that have to go strict carnivore to get to that point where they feel their best. So as long as you're doing what works for you, I think that's the best way to look at it.
Yeah, I think I do feel the best carnivore, but I give myself a little JoJo spice on it,
keto,
which is
keto
still
on the carnivore.
It's like dirty carnivore. Is that right?
Right, dirty carnivore. Dirty ketovore.
Right. I think I feel the best that way.
Yeah. So Jason, how long have you been doing keto?
I started January 1st, 2019. So
okay. So about 4 years now. Yeah. Excellent.
It was a sort of realization that I was not going to be around to be able to play with my grandkids, because they were already running me, crazy back then at 2 years old. So that's when I made a change and sort of never looked back. And then, a couple of years later, I started the whole YouTube thing just to try and, give back what I learned. So that's what precipitated these interviews that I've been doing, trying to get these stories out there, because everybody's got some kind of piece to the puzzle for somebody, right? Like I've talked to a lot of people that have been keto or carnivore for 5-6 years. And then, you have your stories that are fairly recent. So, I like to try and bring, as much information as possible because everybody's at a different point in their journey. And, the first 3, 6, 9 months is definitely the toughest, to turn it into a lifestyle instead of just a diet. But if you've got the right thinking behind it, I think it makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely. It's very Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg of you. collecting the stories,
Yeah.
collecting everyone's stories.
Sure. Yeah. And like I say, I figured, I have a platform, I don't really I couldn't figure out what to do as far as content goes. Obviously
Yeah.
I do
All
like my
right.
chaffle recipes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But to me, being able to, like I say on my about page, I'm just here to help people. That's all I want to do. Right. Like this isn't my job. It's just to help as many people as I can, because I know what it did for me. And if we as a community can help people, then that's basically my goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to have information out there that's a real perspective, not just, when I went to cardiac rehab after my heart attack, I had to take nutrition classes, and those nutrition classes were the same old standard American diet that got me the heart attack in the first place, So I'm like, is she really teaching me at the bottom of the food pyramid that we all know that is just completely saturated with carbohydrates, but that's still what they're teaching in cardiac rehab. And I had my heart attack in 2020.
Yeah.
And that's my inability to do the things that I used to, which is basically like normal people stuff. I can't sweep a floor. I can't even stand and wash the dishes for a long time because my heart is so damaged that my blood pressure drops. And my normal blood pressure is around like 80s over 50s. And that's like normal after my heart attack. But my blood pressure will tank if I'm standing for 20 minutes to do, the dishes, and it'll go down to, 60s over 30s. And that's when you can start getting, coronary artery spasms, which I did have once. That landed me in the hospital and gave me another heart attack. So, when you can't move, and I think mobility wise, I would consider myself pretty immobile, for the sake of just being able to keep living, and you put weight on, because of your inability to move, and then you start doing, a regular standard American diet like they tell you, all those carbs, you're not going to burn those carbs. You're not ever going to walk enough to get your carbohydrates used as fuel. So you don't need a standard American diet of all these carbs, because you're not a triathlete. You're a person sitting on the couch.
Right.
And, if you can get your body, I just think of it as, my body doesn't store, protein in my thighs. My body stores fat in my thighs because I don't need it. My body runs, I don't need all that sugar. My body runs on, all that reserved energy that I have that's sitting there. And you only use that energy when you reach ketosis. So it really kind of gets me that we've based this whole pyramid. I mean, from a statistical standpoint for us, since we're PhDs, I look at the research that led to the standard American diet. And that man threw out a ton of outliers. He handpicked and cherry picked the countries that he went to. That wouldn't even have passed for our dissertations to get our PhD, let alone to start the whole, basically revolution of nutrition that has gone on for so long. It was just one guy who clearly didn't do research well, and what an impact it made, because that's what the American government decided that they wanted to use as a standard for health, which I'm sure it had a lot to do with who pays who for, what stuff.
Yeah, it fit their narrative.
But, it's done a lot of damage. It's done a lot of damage on some really bad research, honestly.
Right, and that's one thing I like about keto is, I'm sure there's books on keto you can get, but you don't have to buy keto. Right. You're not selling keto. We're not selling keto. Right. You don't have to buy the 3 shakes a day, and you have the meals shipped to your house, and that's going to cost you $300 a month. And you gotta pay for these keto videos, and you gotta do these keto exercises. Not selling keto, right? It's you can do it. You can learn everything you need to know for free, and just start doing it if you feel like it's something you want to try. So that is one thing I like about keto, is no one is selling you keto. We're not doing it. We're not doing a keto commercial to get our our $50 kickback or something
Right.
like that. We're
Mhm.
You
just
just
telling
feel
you
good
about our
you know?
experiences. Yeah.
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 Right.
And that's, you're exactly right. And I think that's why over and over and over again, there's certain people and organizations out there that try to shine a bad light on like a ketogenic diet. Like they'll try and tell people, oh, well, it's there. A lot of times they cite like actual nutritional or like therapeutic ketosis instead of what
Yeah.
we're doing. Like
Right.
we're not eating 95% fat like they use in therapeutic.
Right. I don't
like,
have a seizure disorder. I'm not trying to,
Right.
Right.
So, but the thing is that you're exactly right. The only reason that people try to tear it down is because the money's not there to be made off of it.
Right.
You've got
Right.
other programs out there that make billions of dollars every year because it doesn't work. Right.
Mhm,
So you've
right.
got people paying money, and because if these programs out there that you pay money to do worked, then they'd go out of business.
Right.
But they don't
Mhm.
because they don't actually work. So yeah, I know what you're saying for sure. It's kind of difficult to be in this space, and that's why, yeah, okay, my channel name has keto in it, and I use a lot of keto tags and everything else in videos, but that's why I sort of trying to steer towards just a proper human diet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Titling on stuff, because that's, Dr. Barry has sort of brought that into the mainstream as well.
Mhm.
And I think people are a little more likely to pay attention to something that doesn't say keto, unfortunately.
Right.
But
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not putting keto down at all. I mean, we're
Oh,
happy
yeah.
to be on keto. Yeah, I just meant that you don't, from a commercialism perspective, you don't have to buy keto to do keto.
Right, which is great.
Right. You can learn everything from channels like yours, and just do it. And we're telling you, hey, it works. It's
Right.
great.
Yeah, I mean,
You feel better
carbohydrates
on
are
it.
fillers.
Yeah.
Right.
It's cheap fillers.
It's just cheap filler. And
Yeah,
if you want to
yeah.
feed the masses and figure out how to, squash, mitigate, people being starving in the world, the solution was come up with something cheap and feed
Yeah.
people garbage.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Like if you really wanted a healthy planet, everybody would have a chicken coop and a cow in their backyard.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a point in history that we did.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to roll that clock back a little bit, further than the daylight savings time. But if you look back, people they had a chicken coop, and they had
my
the goats and the
dad
cow and
grew up in Chicago, in
Yeah.
the city of Chicago. Now
Yeah.
he's passed for a while now, but he probably would have been, I think, close to 90 now.
Yeah.
And, they had a chicken coop in their backyard in the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
They had
Mhm.
chickens.
Right.
They had chickens, they had laying hens. And when their laying hens stopped laying, he said his mom would go out there and get a chicken for dinner,
Yeah.
and that was in the 30s,
Right,
the late
right.
20s, 30s, they did
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those people were eating butter. They were eating meat. They were eating
Right.
butter. My grandmother lived to almost 100.
Yeah.
That woman never ate margarine. She was a good Italian lady, so she
Right.
only had the best olive oil and butter,
Yeah.
and she was
Right.
heavy on the meats and stuff.
Right. Right.
I mean, that woman
Yeah.
didn't have a problem with her heart, and she lived to almost 100.
Yeah, it's just recently, and I'll say recently, we'll call it the last 50 years, that you see that introduction of heavy sugar-based diets,
Mhm.
as they went the heavy processed food, heavy manufactured food, and it's just the blasting this out in manufacturing food is where you see that introduction of sugar into everything and cheap fillers into everything. And it really is the industrialization of food.
Mhm.
But yeah, you go back before that and you go as far back as you want, ancient Rome, whatever. People had a chicken coop in the backyard, and
Mhm.
people were growing their own food.
Yeah.
They were it was all farmers markets. There weren't factories.
People weren't eating a lot of
making
carbs
food.
either.
Yeah.
Like I
No,
just
they
did
weren't eating a lot of
I just did a
carbs.
video because we're in a collaboration for pies.
Yeah.
And so I did a meat pie, and we just filmed it.
Yeah.
But the reality is that it was a recipe from the early medieval times,
Right.
so I did some research into it because I'd been making this pie for years. And I wanted to know the history of what this hot water crust was that I'd been making for so long. And it was from 476 AD. If they've been wrapping, they've been wrapping pastry, hot water pastry around meat, but they didn't eat the pastry back then. They just used it to preserve their food.
Yeah.
Right.
So they took their meat and they wrapped it around this pastry that was basically just wheat and lard, and they baked it and they left it in that pastry until it was time to eat. And they took that carb of that refined wheat and they threw it away. Yeah. And they ate their wild boar that they got. Yeah. So even back then, even when we were refining wheat, it was just, it was the cellophane around it for them. They knew enough that wheat wasn't good for you, and they just tossed it and then ate the meat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like you say, I know that throughout history, there's been a lot of, good intentions, I guess, let's say, as far as trying to feed the masses, when the population gets so out of hand that, having the self-sustainability of raising your own meats and everything else. In theory, it's a nice thing, but in reality, it's just that, especially with the people that are so detached from food completely.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Kids nowadays think, everything comes from McDonald's and out of the box. So, like I say, I think like with the processed wheats and the seed oils and everything else, good intentions, I guess ultimately it comes down to, who's making money off these things.
Right.
That really drives them. But, I think that's why it's important to have conversations like this, because unfortunately I don't, things are sort of starting to shift. Like there's some diabetes associations that are finally starting to realize that, hey, wait a minute, maybe what we're recommending isn't what we should be recommending.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a lot of the, the actual organizations that are supposed to be advocating for their patients are sort of still captured by special interest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be hard to overcome, I think. It's unfortunately, it's for people like us, it's, it's almost impossible. But the more we talk about it, and, hopefully it gets out to more people. And, we've got people like Dr. Barry that is, he's got such a big following.
Yeah, I like him. I follow him.
Yeah, by himself, he's probably helped hundreds of thousands of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
To realize what we've been doing is wrong. So
yeah.
But no, it's I think the whole homestead thing lends really well to, like, even if you're not keto, if you're truly homesteading, then you're sort of trying to live as close to the land as possible.
Right. Absolutely.
And trying to sustain yourself off of what you can produce. Like even if you were eating a higher carb diet and not a keto diet, like I could still see it being a lot healthier than, living off of a supermarket.
Oh yeah. I mean, living out of your garden versus living off McDonald's. I mean, you can't even compare the two, right? Yeah. Right. If you're like, we've been trying to grow potatoes, obviously potatoes aren't keto. Yeah, I mean, if you're living on potatoes you grew and the vegetables you're growing and those kind of things, that's certainly a way better diet than living off the supermarket at McDonald's.
The difference is the process it takes to get there.
Right.
You have to water, you have to pull weeds, you have to do that. You're actively doing something. You're physically out there working the land all the time.
Yeah.
So if you back in the day, if they had carbs, okay, it took a lot to get that potato.
Right.
It took a lot.
Yeah.
And there was probably times where you didn't eat that much either because food wasn't plentiful. So naturally, your body went into ketosis anyway because you probably didn't have a lot.
Yeah.
And seasonally, you might have ran out of potatoes and all you have was, that deer that you caught, and people just ate the meat. So I like keto and I like carnivore, which is basically, like you say, the perfect human diet, because it kind of goes to the rhythms of what it was like back in the day to be a hunter gatherer.
Yeah.
That's where we came from.
Right.
Yeah.
Times of abundance and times of
so
not.
We got the pointy teeth. You got those pointy teeth in front.
Yeah.
It's not for cheeseburgers.
Yeah. I mean, everything's better the simpler ways anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So have you gotten into any fasting at all, or has it just been?
So I used to intermittent fast.
Yeah, intermittent fasting.
I'm going to say it's not like I actively would be like, gosh, I'm going to intermittent fast. I just realized that I was an intermittent faster because of my heart failure. I sleep a lot. So I would go to bed at like 9, 10 o'clock at night. And honestly, I wouldn't wake up until like 11 or 12 the next day because I need a lot of time to sleep for my heart. So, and then I would get up and I didn't feel like doing anything. I didn't feel like even having coffee with cream for a couple hours. So I was fasting like a good 16 to 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
But because I was consuming so many carbs and my blood sugar was so high, I wasn't losing anything.
It wasn't helping.
Yeah, what I've realized for me is my blood sugar needs to drop into, around 100 for me to see weight loss at all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for me, really, I was never a big fan of breakfast. So I used to always skip breakfast and just jump in at lunch. And then at that time, we'll go say 20 something years ago, you start seeing everything saying, no, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Like, okay, so I'll eat breakfast. You're supposed to get your metabolism going. But now that intermediate fasting, I'm like, no, I'm skipping breakfast. I'm intermediate fasting. So, I mean, if you skip breakfast, which I'm easy, I don't usually eat breakfast. I'll eat usually noon, 1 o'clock when she wakes up, and then we'll have dinner. So I don't know, 18 hours.
Yeah, I'm the queen of intermittent fasting because I always sleep a good 12, 13 hours.
Yeah. I just call it not eating breakfast, but intermediate fasting sounds way better for that. But
Did they just come out with something? I think I was seeing somewhere that they were claiming that intermittent fasting was not the way to lose weight anymore.
I don't know.
Have you seen stuff on that?
It is a pretty, I don't know, the whole fasting sort of spectrum is, I find, like for myself, because I'm the same as you guys basically, is I don't eat breakfast. I typically try and cut off eating at 8:30 at night.
Oh yeah.
A lot of times I won't eat until 4 o'clock the next day, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because just mainly because of the work I do, I'm usually so busy during the day. But I find, or at least what I have found over the last 4 years, and not so much here on YouTube, but over on Instagram where I started.
Okay.
I follow thousands of people over there, and
we're on Instagram. Yeah.
Like I find it's one of those things that's a great tool, but it's one of those things where a good thing is good, but it's not always good to do more. You know what I mean? Like I've seen a lot of people that are fasting all the time, but they're not eating either.
Yes, they're fasting for
days, and that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
I had seen this one channel that YouTube recommended. This guy lost 100 pounds in 3 months.
Yeah.
Water fasting. And I'm
water
like,
diet.
I watched it. I'm like, he didn't eat for 3 months.
Right.
Like he really just
drank water.
He just drank water for 3 months. Well, of course,
you're gonna die,
I'll lose 100 pounds if I only drink water for 3 months.
Yeah, which probably isn't true, because if you didn't eat food for 3 months, you'd be dead. I think 40 days.
That's some determination to only drink water for 3 months.
There is some cases. I think the longest sort of documented water fast was almost a year, actually.
Okay.
It is possible to do, but again, it's you're right. And my biggest concern with fasting, and it sounds like you guys, I wouldn't, you do exactly what I do. What concerns me is when I see people post on Instagram and, like, oh, well, it was my kid's birthday yesterday, so we went completely off the rails. So now I'm going to fast for 2 days to punish myself. They don't say punish myself, but
that's what it feels like. It feels like it's negative.
Like. Yeah. So if you're using it for a tool as a health, certain protocols, like Dr. Jason Fung, he's a sort of a kidney specialist. He treats, kidney disease with fasting, but, he'll recommend a 36-hour fast 2 or 3 times a week just to reset metabolism and everything. So as long as it's done right, any kind of fasting is great. I just find it's people do too much of it. But, if you're keto and you're eating good food, I typically find, okay, well, I'm just not hungry. So
Right.
I just eat when I need to.
Yeah, and a lot of the times we're one meal a day sometimes too, but we're
Yeah.
old. We'll eat dinner at 4 o'clock. I mean,
Mhm.
we're not eating 7, 8 o'clock at night usually.
No, and now
Yeah.
now what I've realized is like when I've slid more towards the carnivore side is, if I'm hungry, I just eat meat,
Yeah.
and I'll try to have that meal, and I feel like I eat more in just like one meal, but then a little bit more towards the end of the day, I'm like, ooh, I'm starting to get hungry again. My stomach is growling, and I'll just, like have a chicken breast is enough, to where I
Yeah.
feel like I'm satiated because
Right.
it's 7:30 at night, and then I'm good.
Mhm.
I feel like I made a carnivore. No, it was keto. It was a keto pizza.
Yeah.
And basically what I did was like I just did like what everybody does, the pork rinds with the cheese and the egg to make
Mhm.
your bottom. But then I just put my meat on top of it because to me, you already have cheese in the crust. It's way too much cheese to do cheesy crust and then your toppings and then cheese on top. And it was probably like a 10-inch pizza. I ate 2 pieces of it stuffed,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
absolutely stuffed. And I thought to myself, man, like we used to be able to put down pizza.
Right.
Like the bread pizza, you
Yeah.
could easily
You
eat
just
like
suck it all down.
I mean the equivalent of that was probably one piece of pizza of what we had when we ate carbs. And I could eat 2-3 pieces of regular pizza and you still kind of felt hungry. But when you start putting tons of meat on stuff, you get full quicker.
Mhm.
And it's nice to be able to just, I'll just go have. I've been canning a lot of stuff, like mason jar pressure canning, and I've canned, beef and chicken. And it's nice to be able to be like, oh, okay, for lunch, I'm just going to go pop open a jar of chicken that I canned and eat it.
Yeah.
Because it's there and it's ready.
Right. And just straight protein.
Yeah, it's just straight protein.
Yeah.
I figured if I wanted to slide more towards carnivore, I needed to make it easy because I don't want to have to get up and go cook a chicken breast. So I'll just stick a chicken breast. I'll stick 20 chicken breasts in 20 jars, pressure can them, and then they're ready for me.
Yeah. Already cooked, ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Whatever you can do to make it easier is, the way to go. And that's why my diet winds up being super boring. Most of the time I'll have burgers. Like on the weekends, my lunch is basically hamburgers.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I'll fry up eggs and put those on top of them. And, that's easy. And then I do a lot of ground beef too. So I know it's boring, but I find whatever's easiest is the, one of the keys to being able to stick to it.
Yeah.
I think the difference is before we would, at least I know for me, I would live to eat. Like, ooh, am I going to get? Am I going to get pasta? Am I going to get this? And now I just eat to live. Like I eat what I need to make my body healthy, and that's it. It's not, which was a very big change for me being an Italian girl from Chicago, because around the table was always very much part of my culture of feeding people and having conversations around the table. And I equated that with, really wonderful times in my life.
Yeah.
But I had to separate the emotion of eating and what that meant to me with people and, my health. And once you do that, once you separate the emotion out, or at least take steps to work towards separating the emotion, you realize that food's just fuel. It doesn't have, you can still sit around the table and talk to people, and it doesn't have to be what you're eating. It's just about enjoying the people you're with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's, and once you can get to that point is when it does become easier. Just being comfortable with, I can't remember how many times I've had, you've been at a barbecue with friends or something, and I'll have someone say, well, okay, well, you're keto, so you can't eat this. It's like, well, no, it's not that I can't eat it. It's I'm choosing not to eat it.
I don't want to.
I can eat whatever I want. I'm not, I just choose not to. And I choose to look at it as, okay, well, maybe I can't eat the bun, but I can eat everything else with it. I can eat burgers and I can eat steaks. And, if I told somebody, okay, well, you want bacon and eggs for breakfast and cheeseburgers for lunch and a ribeye for supper, like, doesn't that sound good,
Right.
as long as
Right.
you're not eating the potatoes and the wheat with it. So it's, and you're right. Unfortunately, a lot of people grew up with food being a focus.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. A lot of
For their
social
life.
activities are around
It
food.
is, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
social
Yeah.
activities around eating,
Mhm.
consuming, you
Yeah.
know.
I had a hard time when we started out, and I know I got a lot of flack of it too
Yeah.
from it too,
Yeah.
because I know I missed pasta and I missed stuff like that. And I think you need to go through that process because, for me at least, I felt like it was, like a loss. Like I had to go through the stages of my grief of not being able to have this
Right.
anymore. But then I think the hardest thing for me was I spent like the first month or two watching a bunch of YouTube videos on keto cake and
Mhm.
keto this and here's keto bread and here's keto that. And I'm gonna be honest, I tried a lot of them, and the only thing I liked was the chaffle. And not that I didn't like it, just that it didn't even work. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't cook all the way.
Right.
It didn't look anything like what the people had. And then I realized I need to stop having my food imitate other food.
Right.
Because if I call this keto bread and I'm trying to search for something to replace the bread, I'm always going to be thinking about, well, I want bread and I'm trying to find a replacement for it. And
You're
when
trying to game it. You're
I'm trying to
the
game it.
system. Yeah.
And when I slipped more towards carnivore, I forgot all about that stuff because it became easier. I stopped going, oh, I wish I could have bread, because I stopped chasing a replacement. I just forgot about it.
Yeah.
After 3 months, I just, I just forgot about it. And it's just like, I don't like kidney beans. I've never liked kidney beans. I've never eaten kidney beans in my life. Why can't I just not like bread and not eat bread? Why does somebody have to judge and be like, well, you can't have that hamburger with bread?
Right.
How about I just don't like bread like I don't like kidney beans?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think well, not everybody, but a lot of people do the same thing. I did the exact same thing when I started, because I was watching. There's a ton of YouTube channels out there. Keto Connect was one of them. Young couple. They had, like, I even bought one of their recipe books for keto stuff. And you're right. You fall into this. Hey, I want to try this and I want to try that and I want to try all these different things. So I was making fat bombs and mug cakes and bread and all this stuff for the first 6 months. But you're exactly right. It's like, well, what am I doing here? Like, I'm not really helping anything. I'm just trying to replace what I used to eat before with something else that, ultimately wasn't helping my journey at all.
And it's never going to be as good as it was. So you just, at some point, you've just got to say, I just don't eat that anymore. Instead of trying to find something similar,
sure,
trying to find a loophole. Oh, but if I do this, I can have that.
Right. Like, I don't want
loopholes.
Cauliflower crust on my pizza.
Yeah.
I just don't make pizza anymore.
Right.
When I made what I considered it looked like a pizza, but it didn't taste like a pizza. It was a chaffle with some pepperoni on it. Why can't I just have a chaffle with some pepperoni on it? Why do I have to call it pizza? Why do I have to call it carnivore lasagna? It ain't lasagna, folks. It's just
never going to be lasagna.
It's just maybe some Italian sausage you put with some cheese. Just
right.
Celebrate what you made and not try to make it, something else. Because that, to me, mentally, I can't handle that.
Yeah.
Like, I can't handle looking at it. And maybe other people can. I don't want to bring it to my face and it looks exactly like a bagel, because my memory tells me what that bagel is supposed to taste like.
Right.
And the moment I put it in my mouth, and I don't care if it's been 2 years since I had a bagel, I have years of experience eating bagels. and my memory is going to tell me, sister, that's not a bagel. Do not eat that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's because you're right. It's never going to be as good as what you remember. So it's kind of a letdown. Yeah. And you're right. You just do what you can. Like I've made plenty of pizzas out of chaffles, and I make pizzas on my hamburgers too. Like I'll put cheese and pepperoni, and like I don't call them pizzas. Well, maybe I do for YouTube, but
That's
that's
all
Right.
right. That's all
Well,
right.
that-
Yeah, we're not
that's
putting you
just-
down. We're not
That's
putting
just so
you down at all.
you gotta have a way to get the clicks.
Yeah.
Let's
Right.
be
Yeah,
real.
we're not putting you
do.
down at all on that.
But
yeah.
I doubt
No,
that you're
yeah.
turning around and telling your significant other, "You want to try this pizza I made?" No,
Yeah.
they're like, "Hey, that's not pizza."
That's not a pizza. Yeah, I know what a
Yeah.
pizza looks like. But you just and it's what she said. It's do you live to eat or do you eat to live? You know, if you're living just to eat, then you're going to have a lot of health issues. You're going to be very unhappy. You might have those moments of, oh, that tasted so good. You got to
Mhm.
eat so you can be alive and stop there. Right. There's other things in life to enjoy other than that next mouthful of food.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of the what I heard lately. I think it was semi-retired Bob. You guys know Bob.
I don't know.
He's basically on a lion diet, so he's pretty much carnivore.
Well, I'm gonna have to follow him now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had him on the show a few weeks ago, and he basically 9 months ago he couldn't even walk.
Yeah.
Wow.
In such bad shape, but now he is he does daily videos of him out walking, a lot of miles. So, but what he I don't know where he heard it from, but basically he says, nothing tastes as good as healthy feels.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
So
Right.
that's the way I look at it. That piece of cake or that, whatever it is in the moment is always going to taste good and you're going to get that high off of it. But in the long run, it's not going to help in any way.
Right. I think people who, like, obviously he was so debilitated to the fact that he wasn't walking. People who have real health issues, like for me, I would give anything. I'd give anything to just be able to dig out my chicken coop again. Yeah. And that was something that, nobody likes to do and I didn't really care to do. But if I could roll it back pre-heart attack, pre-heart failure, and be able to do that, I would happily go out there and dig it out every single day because I just can't do those things anymore. Yeah. So I think when you lose your health, if you're, lucky enough to be able to regain it through diet like that, I mean, you really... No, I mean, I don't care what it is. Nothing, like he said, feels as good as being able to just feel better when you have to live in pain and not being able to do things all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good that you got there before anything happened to you. You decided, I'm going to go on this diet and make my life better before you had any complications. So,
for sure. Yeah, like I definitely am thankful that I was able to make a change because and again, I never got blood work done, but I could probably say that I was probably pre-diabetic at very least kind of thing. Wasn't having any complications or anything. So yeah, I am thankful that I was able to find something that could work as a lifestyle before I got to the point. Like I had nagging things like plantar fasciitis and hit like back pain and knee pain, and I had 3 kidney stones before.
Those are painful. I've had those.
Those are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But knock on wood, nothing sort of major has come up in the last 4 years. I have found that I can't really tolerate a lot of like nuts, like almond and peanuts and stuff like that either, which kind of sucks because that's one thing I do like, but I get some inflammation from them. But I think overall you just have to keep listening to your body and what it tells you, just react to it and make the change you need to. And if you feel better not eating something, well, sometimes it sucks, but again, I'd give up almost anything to basically be able to play with my grandkids for
absolutely
as long as they want to. Right. So
yeah, exactly. All right. So we're coming up on that hour mark.
Yeah. No,
that just flew by.
Yeah. No, it's been a great conversation. I like hearing all these different stories, and I think you're the first. Well, you're not the first. I had Jess from Keto Homestead with Jess. She was on. She's a homesteader as well. So it's, again, I think this sort of crossover between like healthy eating and the homestead channels is probably going to get even bigger as we grow. So I do thank you for, coming on here and taking your time to tell your story so that we can, put it out there to help anyone we can going forward with their journey.
No, absolutely. We were hoping to be your first PhDs on PhD TV.
Yeah, we can say that you are. Hopefully everyone
Nice.
gets the PhD tag. Like I've been trying to.
It's Perfect Human Diet.
Right. Yeah.
But we'll
That's
have
my
to,
PhD is not in Perfect Human Diet.
Right.
yeah, it's like I say, because I started off just calling it Keto Conversations, and I was like, well, I don't want it to be just keto. I don't want people to think it's just a keto based thing. I want it just to be, are you living a healthier diet? You're living a proper human diet, and that's sort of what I want to bring to everyone. So
nice.
Cool.
You're doing good work.
Well, thank you.